Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Cathy Young. She's a journalist with the Bulwark, Newsday, and Reason Magazine. How you doing?
Good, good.
Good. So
How
we,
about yourself?
not too bad, not too bad.
Mhm.
Ready for the
Yeah,
weekend?
I know we've been delaying this for a while because I've just had
Yeah.
like everything going on. So I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yeah, me as well. Me
Yeah.
as well. So you were actually at Airplay. You were a panelist there. So I wanted to make sure I
Yeah.
interviewed you, and then you also wrote extensively about GamerGate at the time. So
Yeah, I did a three-part series for Reason. I also wrote for the New York Observer, which is another place I was writing for at the time. And I think and then I did a kind of retrospective piece on the 5 year mark in 2019 for Arc Digital, which is another publication where I used to be an associate editor before I moved on to the Bulwark. So, yeah, so I've done my share of writing.
well, hey, what made you want to write about GamerGate? What made this something that you thought was interesting or worth covering?
Well, yeah, I should explain from the outset that I am not a gamer. Like the only, I mean, I occasionally play Tetris and what do you call it, Millipede. Yeah, it's sort of like my college age nostalgia when, I used to play this stuff at the arcade. So yeah, I haven't really moved on to like, real video games, although I have some good friends who are gamers, and I have beta read fanfic based on Fallout. So I know something about some games. I think Fallout and what do you call it? Mass Effect? Is that? Yeah,
Mass
I think
Effect's
so.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
Mass
good
Effect,
series.
right. A couple of others, but anyway, so yeah, so I am somewhat, up to date on what's going on with video games. But anyway, my interest in Gamergate was really more about the sort of the beginning of the culture wars, because I was interested in the sort of the impact of social justice activism on fandoms. And my background with that came from television fandoms. I was fairly extensively involved between, I think, like 2003 and 2012, 13 in the Xena Warrior Princess fandom, which was very politicized because I don't know how much you know about the Xena fandom. There was like a very active contingent of lesbian activists who believed, and because the show kind of played with the idea, and this was like the 1990s, so at the time, like gay characters were really not that common on TV. So they kind of played with the idea that like maybe there was a uh, sexual relationship between Xena, who was the main character, and her sidekick Gabrielle, and this was kind of a fun thing that they thought they were doing. There was fanfic about it, and then it just developed into these really intense like culture wars over like the sexuality of the main characters, where like if you didn't believe that Xena and Gabrielle were lovers, you were a homophobe and just generally a horrible person. And I mean, I personally got attacked for writing I mean, not physically attacked, but just really kind of viciously attacked online for writing fanfic that depicted like Xena in a romantic relationship with a male character, which was, by the way, also like part of the show. But apparently that was like not okay. And I just got these arguments like, well, you're causing harm, if you are writing heterosexual fanfic about a character whom a lot of marginalized people believe to be gay and that sort of thing. And so I basically like had to spend a lot of time defending myself from accusations of being a homophobe. Like there was some really ridiculous stuff that I will not even like, get into the details of. It's just sort of amusing in a way because it's kind of like sort of an early forerunner of like a lot of modern debates about cancel culture. Like there were people on, because there was at the time, like there was a main Xena board, and there were people like ganging up on other people, some of whom were my friends. And anyway, it was just insane. And so I was kind of battle hardened. I mean, the thing that was amusing about it, by the way, looking back, because I remember thinking at one point, like, why am I even wasting time on this? And like having stupid fights with people on a Xena message board. And in a funny way, it really kind of prepared me for Twitter and like the social media battles that eventually became part of kind of like everyone's professional life. Because I think like starting in maybe 2012, 13, it really kind of became almost like the expectation that if you were a journalist, you had to be on Twitter, and and there were fights, like there were cancellations, and I was kind of used to that. And like several times, people were like, how do you manage to stay so calm, in the middle of like not lose your cool in the middle of all this, crazy shit going on. I can curse, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
you're
I'm
fine. Yeah, go
assuming
ahead.
that I can use. Yeah.
Yeah, use
All
whatever
right.
language you
So
want. Just don't say the
yeah,
N
and
word.
I said, you would never believe, like you would never believe where I got my battle training. It was in the Xena fandom, fighting about the like all important question of whether Xena is gay or bisexual and whether she could have a relationship with a man. So that was kind of amusing because it did in a way prepare me for these for this crazy social media stuff. But it also really made me interested in like the insertion of politics and social justice, identity politics into culture. And I eventually got into some other fandoms that were kind of related to like fantasy and sci-fi. Um, and it was interesting because when I was sort of beginning to get into this, and I remember that I went over into like there was a British show. There was a British Robin Hood show that was on from like 2006 to 2009, and I remember that when I first got into that around like the time that the show ended, because I have this habit of jumping into fandoms like when the source material is over. That's sort of my pattern, and and I remember thinking, like, wow, it is so great to be in a fandom that is not political, where people are talking about like identities and like, politics, and how you're supposedly like doing harm to marginalized people by liking one pairing or another. And then like a couple of years later, it was like the politics started invading every fandom, and like suddenly you could get attacked for like for liking a fictional relationship that some people considered to be abusive, because like suddenly like, oh, like you're being an apologist for you're being a rape apologist because you like a romantic storyline in which the male character continues to pursue the female character after she has rejected him. So that's rape culture, and suddenly like you're being a rape apologist if you're into that. So yeah, so I just saw a lot of this going on. I saw some really really toxic behavior, like people getting harassed for and I'm not talking about myself really, because I do have a pretty thick skin, but I actually did see a woman who were a teenage girl who was battling depression and who was kind of dealing with that by writing fanfic and doing a fan art about like characters she liked, just get really discouraged and just really demoralized after some people really just kind of ganged up on her and told her that she was romanticizing a character who was an abuser, and blah 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 blah. And she just I think she actually like completely deleted everything, like all the writing and art that she had done, and kind of disappeared from online. I mean, I hope she's okay and didn't like try to kill herself or whatever. But it just really struck me as incredibly toxic that people were doing that, and people were bringing, political issues that to me seemed really far-fetched into discussions of, art and entertainment. And that was where, and I apologize for this lengthy preface, but this is where, when Gamergate started, and I kind of, caught wind of what was going on, I just saw that a lot of it was about the same issues, about people trying to inject social justice politics into art, and video games or entertainment in this case. I guess we could get into a whole discussion of whether or not video games
we
are
might.
art, and I'm sure that's a hot potato too, right? Because I'm sure some people will get upset if you suggest that video games are art. Some people will get upset if you suggest that they're not, But anyway, so yeah, I just looked at what was going on, and I'm sure that there was, and I could see this from the beginning, that there was definitely some bad behavior on both sides. I also saw, like, I followed to some extent, like, the stuff that was going on around Zoe Quinn. And I did actually later interview Aaron Gione for a fairly short-lived publication called Heat Street,
I remember them, yes. Louise Mensch.
which eventually went online. And Louise Mensch, oh, that's a whole other story, because Louise Mensch kind of became a little psychotic, but and I was very happy that I didn't take a full-time job that she offered me at Heat Street.
What happened with that?
She was a serious weirdo. But anyway, but at the time it started out as a school publication that was kind of a right of center alternative to the Huffington Post, I think. Anyway, so yeah, I interviewed Aaron for that. And, and I was interested in the story to the extent that it seemed to me that what he was doing was sort of what a lot of women were doing and were encouraged to do at the time, which is talk about, what he perceived as an abusive relationship. And I think it got incredibly misreported because, and I only found out later when I interviewed him about all the details, that actually he didn't, post his, uh, the Zoe post on 4chan or someplace else where he, as
Well, he
claimed,
didn't post it on 4chan. I think he might have posted it on Penny Arcade, but not 4chan.
But I think that was actually a board that was supposed to be sympathetic to social justice,
Aaron,
right?
Aaron was a social justice person. He was.
Yeah, that was the funny thing, that Aaron was himself very involved in the social justice movement. And I think part of what he was upset about was that he perceived Zoe Quinn's behavior to be antithetical to the ethics that she herself was claiming to profess. And what people also didn't mention was that he was encouraged in this post by a bunch of female friends who were feminists and who basically felt that, he was doing what, women were encouraged to do in the sense of speaking out about being abused. And then, of course, this whole shit show began where, it was removed by Penny Arcade and some other board.
Something awful.
I'm sure you know. Yeah, right. And then people did repost it on 4chan, and I mean, there was some incredibly nasty stuff posted about Zoe. I know that was the case, and I'm sure, I have no doubt whatsoever that Zoe was harassed, and that other people were harassed. But it just seemed to me like the narrative of Gamergate that was being proposed was just completely off. That it was portrayed as this backlash against women in gaming, and I saw these descriptions that just had nothing whatsoever to do with what I was seeing, which was like, oh, well, it's a bunch of guys who don't like girls anywhere near their video games. Yeah, and that's why their mascot is a female gamer, Vivian. It was just really bizarre. And and I did actually right from the beginning. So I mean, I was very upfront about this. I said, yeah, like I don't think it's this, misogynistic, uh, gaggle of abusive guys or whatever, misogynists. But I did say, like, yeah, like it's a backlash against a certain form of feminism, which was represented by Zoe, which was sort of deeply enmeshed in this very, illiberal social justice movement that was policing people's preferences and art and so on. And I said, yeah, like any, again, you can see this like in the very first piece that I wrote in Reason. I said, yeah, like any backlash against any kind of feminism, it is going to become a magnet to some extent for like real misogynists who really do not like women, or at least women in prominent roles, and who are going to take advantage of this to really lash out at women. And it's funny because like one of the people that I mentioned was Mike Cernovich, who later became kind of infamous with the alt-right and kind of became this figure who was doing all sorts of stuff that was not related to gaming at all. So it was just kind of, when I was rereading it was kind of amusing to see that, like, specifically named Mike Cernovich. Um, and there was a lot of I mean, like I said, it was a shit show. And of course it attracted people like Milo Yiannopoulos, who did you by the way interview Milo for this, or
So I wanted to reach out to him to sort of like interview him, but he's dropped off the internet basically. His
oh yeah,
current
because I know
his
he's
current
doing all
shtick
this.
is he's supposed to be like a far right Christian nationalist, and
Yes, yes, I
it's
know.
pretty
And he's
cringe.
supposedly like he's converted from being gay.
Yeah, he's
So,
prayed away the gay. It's
that's, yeah, yeah, well, supposedly. Yes.
yeah, that's what he says.
Yeah, no, it's funny
He also
because
thinks
let
people
me
should
tell
cut
you,
people's tongues
and I'm
out.
gonna, and I have no way of proving what I'm saying now, but I swear to you that this is true. Like when I first started interacting with Milo online, I thought, this guy is trouble. And, he is, and I swear, like, I actually thought to myself, like, he is going to implode in some spectacular way. I had no idea how spectacular, but, honestly, I just had a bad vibe about Milo from the beginning. And I did actually apologize for this later in one of my posts. I did like have friendly interactions with him, partly because it's kind of a herd mentality thing. Because I saw a lot of, like, I think a lot of kind of regular, not far right, not crazy people who were like mainstream journalists were kind of charmed by Milo, because Milo can be, I don't know about now because I haven't, like, I don't know his current shtick at all. But Milo, at least at the time, could be very charming. He's got this sort of elegant British accent, and he's a good-looking guy who has this, these suave manners, and this sort of sense of humor. I was kind of put off by some of the things he did at the time, because you probably remember this, when he just really viciously attacked Liana Kersner, who I
Yeah,
know you did review,
I
right?
did. Yeah, I've interviewed
Uh,
her.
yeah, and he was just vicious to her. And I think it was because she questioned something that he reported, right? And then he came back at her with something like, well, I'm a real reporter and you show off your tits for a living. And I, what the hell, what the hell was that? And I know, like, people did take him to task for that. So I mean, this notion that misogynistic behavior was like tolerated by Gamergate in general, because and I'm sure you know this, like, Gamergate wasn't one thing. I mean, there were a lot of different subsets of Gamergate. There were fairly, like, you know, regular people who were mainly on Twitter, I think. And there were like the on 4chan, obviously, where people were anonymous and nobody knew who anybody else was. And people were sometimes talking about really nutty stuff. Like there was somebody who said, and I think it was a woman actually, right? That she wanted to like somehow like con Zoe Quinn into falling in love with her and then making her kill herself, or
I don't
something
remember
crazy.
this. No.
Like there were people saying some really crazy shit, and I'll tell you, by the way, as somebody who again spent I put on my time on the Xena board, and I know that like a fandom or anything that looks like fandom is going to draw a certain percentage of crazy people. I mean, like this, because the Xena board was much, much smaller than GamerGate. I mean, there were like maybe a total of like maybe 1,500 people on that board.
How many
So,
people do you think were involved with GamerGate?
oh, that's actually a good question. Do you have any idea?
So at
It's
least
probably in the
10,000.
thousands.
At least 10,000.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean,
Well, that's
when I
so.
say when I say there were like maybe 1,500 people on the Xena board, this is like the total membership. I think that the
Okay.
ones who were like really active, there was maybe a core of I don't know, like four or
But
five
it's
hundred.
also depends like what you mean by like involved with GamerGate, because like
Right,
if you
right,
like
yeah,
someone who thinks of
obviously.
themselves like, oh, I'm like a GamerGate activist, I'm going to the meetup next week, like that's one thing.
Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
also have people who like, well, I tweeted about it 4 times. And then you have
Right,
like
right,
other
right,
people, I
right.
tweeted about it once, and then you have
Yeah,
other
it
people
was really
and they're
kind of the
like,
same
I
thing, by the
saw
way, with the Xena board, because
well,
you occasionally had
so
someone who just sort of came in and said,
okay,
"Hi, I'm a Xena fan," and
okay,
sometimes they would say, "Oh, like I'm so happy that I found this board. I'm gonna like spend so much time here," and then they would disappear a week later and like move on
right.
somewhere. So yeah, but anyway, but even there, like we had people people trying to stalk other people. Like we had occasionally, like we once had somebody like try to fake a suicide and make it look like they killed themselves because other people were being mean to them. And it was so yeah, like any place where you have like a fandom like atmosphere where people will congregate online and talk about something that really makes them feel passionate, you're going to get some weirdness, right? I mean,
Sure,
you know
yeah.
that. And I
So
know
I
that.
do want
So
to
yeah, there were definitely some weirdos associated with Gamergate, but I think, and as I said, there were many different layers of Gamergate and so on. But yeah, but I would say like of the people that I interacted with on Twitter, I would say like the vast majority of them were sort of just regular people who were fairly mainstream in their views and, didn't tolerate harassment or racism or misogyny. And, one thing that I mentioned in a couple of articles that I did, there was, I'm sure you know this, there was at one point a Gamergate harassment patrol,
yes, yeah, I've interviewed
which
several
was
people who were involved with that.
right,
Yeah.
whose entire purpose was to keep people from being harassed and like to report anyone who would dox
And they did
people.
expose Mateus
The,
Prado Sousa, the Brazilian harasser
yeah,
of Anita
who
Sarkeesian.
who made the threats to Anita
Yeah.
Sarkeesian. And then somebody, I think one of the like uh, pro social justice journalists, I think
Jason
wrote
Schreier, Kotaku, he wrote an
yes,
article, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
he
except
wrote
he still
a piece.
blamed Gamergate for it, kind of. If you read his article, he says that even though Gamergate did the right thing, it's this harassment came out of
Yes, exactly.
the
Yeah,
atmosphere of
so he kind
Gamergate. I
of
think it
gives
was.
them, yeah, he kind of gives them credit for exposing this harasser, and then he says, "Oh, like it's so hypocritical because they're claiming credit for exposing the harasser, but like they created the atmosphere that led to the harassment." And yeah, I mean, I think that again, if you look at what was going on with Gamergate in general, I think there was definitely a lot of harassment going on sort of across the board. Like people were making death threats. Again, like pro Gamergate people, anti Gamergate people. I know that Christina Hoff Summers got threats. I never did. I'm gonna knock on wood as I say that because, oh, actually, wait. No, I'm wrong. I did, although that was later and it was more associated with the alt right. Although it did kind of come out of Gamergate. You know this guy whose nickname was Wild Goose or something?
Oh, Bill Wagner crew. Yeah, they doxed me. Which
Oh,
I sound a
oh,
little too excited to say that, but yeah, no,
oh, right, right.
they were harassing me and my parents for like weeks.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, this was
that's
10
yeah.
years ago. I
Well,
mean, like, I don't like. I'm not like. Obviously,
this
it's bad
guy
behavior.
left a message on my voicemail. And I'm sure, getting my phone number was probably fairly easy because you could find like, things I had posted that mentioned my phone number. It wasn't that difficult. Um, but yeah, it kind of freaked me out because he left a message in my voicemail, and he read like like little excerpt from a Hitler speech in German, which so yeah, that was like, I mean, I don't know German all that well, but I know that the word Jude was there a lot, so but it was apparently like a bit from a Hitler speech, and he was trying to do like the sort of manic Hitler inflections. So yeah, and then he posted on Twitter an audio clip of himself leaving me that message, and I think that's where he said it was a part from a Hitler speech. And the thing that really kind of blew my mind is that I reported it to support, and they send me this automated message saying, oh well, actually that doesn't meet our criteria for harassment. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Well,
So yeah,
Twitter
I did
Twitter doesn't
actually have
care.
that
Yeah, they don't do
I
anything.
did have that experience once, but it wasn't strictly speaking related to Gamergate, although I think it
Well, it
came
probably
out of.
was actually because he so what he was doing. Well, he was with a group called the Bill Wagner Crew, and he was harassing pro Gamergate people and antis too. Supposedly, I don't know if he ever actually harassed any
Yeah, I
antis,
think so.
but he was targeting the
He
Gamergaters.
was buddies with Ethan Ralph,
He
right?
was, yeah. Ethan Ralph
Right,
later
right.
teamed up with
That's what.
him.
Yeah, because I remember that several people who were sort of associated with Gamergate contacted me to say that I shouldn't be too freaked out because. And I remember I said to someone like, could he like actually be dangerous? And the guy said, well, like maybe if he left his mom's basement, he might be.
Well,
So
apparently he had a job. This is what people tell me. I'm not 100%, but apparently he had a job where he was actually a contractor with either the government, the federal government, and he actually
oh,
lost his security clearance because if he was harassing people.
oh my god.
Well, he would also like try and scam people a little bit too. Like he ran like a fake GoFundMe, pretending to be Nicole Sund, Cult
Oh
of
my
Vivian.
god.
Yeah, and like some
What
crazy
a
shit.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so that was like my one experience with like anything
Well,
that had to
technically,
do with.
yeah. Technically,
I
he
did
also he
just
also
in
remember he
case.
harassed Lily Feng, and her family and friends
Oh, was she the
after.
one who committed suicide?
Yeah. Well, she was
Oh, good
one
for
of
her.
several people who lost their lives.
Right.
Um,
Ooh, wow. Yeah.
Liviana took her life too. I'm not sure if you knew her.
Who?
Liviana, Giovanna Liviana.
No, I didn't know her.
She was a
Oh my
YouTuber
god.
who talked about it a
Wow.
lot. Also moderated the Discord server. Anyway, there's a lot of
Yeah,
questions we
yeah,
got to get
that's
to.
normal. But yeah, I did actually just in case, I did report it to the cops, and I said, like if you get like because I was the one thing that I was concerned about was being swatted, because I
Hmm.
knew that that had happened to some people. And I lived with my mom, who is now like 87, and at the time was, or yeah, I guess she was in her late 70s at the time. And I thought, I really do not want like a bunch of cops coming to my door and scaring my mom to death. I mean, I'll be fine, but my mom is kind of a high strung person, so yeah, so I did go to the cops and say, if you get a like 911 call claiming that there is a like situation going on at my address, just call me first and make sure that this is actually a call from me and not someone trying to swat me. And they were like, yeah, we like they knew about these situations. They didn't know anything about Gamergate, but they
Well,
knew
that's
that this
that's
was
good.
being
When I
swatted.
went to the police over the same person actually, um, they didn't like. They're like what? What's the internet? Like they were like it was horrible. They had like no idea what they were like. Like so this happened on Twitter. Is that a website? It's like okay, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like
But anyway, yeah, so there was stuff that went on, but and I think again, a lot of it, as you said, was people who were not really like strictly speaking part of Gamergate, but were kind of harassing people all around. And that was and I think that Gamergate per se kind of got conflated with that. And I mean, of course, when we say GamerGate per se, what does that even mean? Because it's
Hmm.
not an
Well,
organization
I
that
was
has
going to
membership.
ask you, can you define what GamerGate was?
Oh, well, right. Okay. So I would say that it was, broadly speaking, it was a like an online movement that it sort of existed on two levels. One, it was focused specifically on gaming journalism, and it was I think a lot of people really were concerned about ethics in gaming journalism. It was not. I mean, I know that it kind of became a joke for a lot of people, but I think a number of people really were seriously concerned about that, and I think they did have. I mean, I think that some of them, by the way, kind of wrongly saw active collusion where it was more like groupthink. Because I think a lot of, like, there are a number of people in Gamergate, I think, tended to have a sort of conspiracy theory mentality about the media, like, oh, look at all those headlines showing up at the same time. Well, that
Well,
doesn't necessarily mean like
they
that
that
anyone is
was there was
coordinating.
they were coordinating though, right? The Game Journal Pros list.
Yeah, no, that did happen, but sometimes it really was just like one person writing something, then everybody else kind of jumping on the bandwagon. But it's a little bit like uh, you know uh, I know you wanted to ask me about yesterday's Biden Trump
Well,
debate,
yeah,
but
we can
it
get to
was
that
like,
later on
yeah,
though.
but like today, and even last night, I was looking at Twitter, and some of the pro-Trump people were going like, oh my God, look at all those like liberal Democrats, all these journalists suddenly saying that Biden needs to drop out. Like, oh, obviously this whole thing was a setup, and like this whole thing was coordinated
Well, we were gonna wait for
to,
that,
yeah.
but okay.
Well,
So,
that's
what do
kind of
you think of the
stupid.
debate? What do you see?
Oh my God. Well, I it was funny because I got home a little late. I went out shopping and I came out, like, by the time I got back it was around 9:30. And then I looked at Twitter and I thought, do I really want to tune in for this? I mean, do I really want to suffer? And I did watch a little bit. I mean, I watched some clips, I watched a little bit live. Um, I mean, I have at this point, I have no idea what's going to happen. I do think, and I guess we could get into that, but I don't know how much time you want to spend on politics. I certainly
Probably
believe
10 to 15
there are a
minutes
lot of
tops.
things I don't like about Joe Biden. I do think that, Trump, especially after January 6th, I think is someone who really should not be like anywhere close to power.
I agree.
So, as a friend of mine said, well, I would vote for zombie Biden before I voted for Trump. So, like, even if he was actually dead, like, in a weekend at Bernie's, and like somebody was physically like waving his hand. So, yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what's going to happen next with all these people like wanting to replace him. Um, it's interesting because there doesn't seem to be, like, so far at least among the voters. I think he may have actually gained like a point or two. I guess we'll see what
We'll
happens
see
to
in
the
a few
polls.
days. Like it's probably too early to
Yeah.
tell.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, like somebody was saying today, that maybe like the expectation of being a little mentally slow was already kind of
Hmm.
built into people's perceptions of Biden. So this is not going to change things all that much. So it's going to be interesting if the base is like, what, we're voting for Biden, we don't want him going anywhere, and it's the sort of the elites, the journalists and some of the Democratic Party like operatives are the ones going, no, replace them. So that's going to be interesting. I do think, I mean, I'm not really buying this notion that, oh, like he was like senile all along and they were hiding this from us.
So wait, do you
I
think he is? You know, because
I think he's
I know the
uh
campaign said that he was sick,
I do
and
think he was sick.
then the
I mean,
next
like,
day,
he's
this
been
morning,
really cold.
he was
And
fine.
yeah,
He was just
yeah,
actually really energized at the rally.
yeah. So, I think that even in like apparently after about half an hour into the debate, he kind of picked up a little
Yeah,
bit
he
and
did,
was
but
somewhat energized.
it was a
I
rough
mean, I
start.
think that if this was not a guy who is 81, like who just had a cold and had a bad, debate night, I think everybody would very easily move on from this. Like, we would expect him to do better next time. We would expect him to like do better in campaign appearances. Unfortunately, in this case, it really does kind of feed straight into the
Okay, well that's not good. Yeah, that's. All right, one moment. Can you hear me? Okay, bear with us a minute while we have technical problems. This is my first time using Zoom. Okay, all right, we're back. Can you hear me?
so yeah. So where were we? Oh yeah. So as I was saying, in this case, this bad performance really feeds into the narrative that already existed, that Biden is too old. I don't think he's senile. I mean, I think he's slower mentally than he was like 4 years ago. If you compare like his presentation now to what he was like then, um, I think he's mentally coherent. If you look, because I see people saying, oh, well, today he was just, he looked different because he was reading off the teleprompter. Well, first of all, he was often looking in different directions. So he was looking out of the crowd. He was very animated. So he wasn't just like straight up reading. And a lot of it did sound sort of at least somewhat improvised. And, if you really do have dementia, a teleprompter ain't going to help you. So, I mean, if you're really out of it, I don't care how good the text is before you, you're not going to be able to like deliver it in a meaningful way. You're just going to like drone on and like read it maybe in this sort of hollow voice or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's as alert as he was. I don't think he's seen. I mean, we've seen him at like he gave the State of the Union address, and
Yeah,
after
he was great.
the
Yeah.
address, he interacted there. We've seen him interact with people at international events. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's out of it. He's um uh but I think that this is definitely not good. I mean, I think that people did try to like dismiss concerns about his age and mental alertness in a way that is really not helpful. And I mean, I did see people, including some of my colleagues, get jumped on for right, even raising the issue, because there was this attitude, I think, among some Biden voters that, oh, like, you're hurting Biden just by mentioning this. Well, it's going to hurt him a lot more if you don't mention it and then it just shows up in a situation like this. Now, is it, I mean, are people right that he should step down? It's a really dicey situation because I think Kamala Harris is even less popular than Biden. And I honestly don't think it's because she's a black woman. I think partly it's because, she's not, I mean, I don't see her as, although I'll tell you, last night she was fairly charismatic. Like when she was talking about Biden, I saw some people say, yeah, see, like that's the energy we need. And yeah, like maybe she can do it. I think that there's also a concern that like the thing about Biden that I think made him a really good like foil for Trump, or a really good like candidate to run against Trump in 2020, uh, is that he's a centrist. Like he is
Hmm.
this guy who can appeal to moderate Republicans. He's a guy who can appeal to the sort of what used to be the Reagan Democrats. Like he's not somebody who's going to be out there like going free Palestine, you know. And neither is Kamala Harris, but I think she is definitely someone who is perceived as being sort of closer to that camp. Um, and I think like if she can dispel that perception, and it's tough it's a tough situation because I mean the Republican Party right now is full of dysfunction that is just off the charts, and I think no normal person denies that. But I mean the Democratic Party has its own problems, which is this tension between the progressives, a lot of whom are connected to that social justice movement that we were
Hmm.
talking about, and and the centrists. And I think Obama's genius was that he was able to, for the most part, keep those two not glued together, but kind of in the same coalition. Biden was able to do that for a while. I think now all the progressives are pissed at him because of
I don't.
Israel.
I
He's
don't
gonna
know. I
sign
don't.
Joe
So,
and
do you
whatnot.
think that the? I think that there's
So with
some of
Kamala
the.
Harris, I just don't know if she can
Kathy, can I
kind of
talk?
step up. And I think like an attempt to challenge Biden right now. I think this is the fear that a lot of people have, is that the convention, which is coming up, is going to turn into this incredible shit show with the progressives and the normies at each other's throats, and it's going to scare everyone else away, right? So who knows? I mean, I am just trying to stay sane, and that's it. So we'll see. I mean, I honestly think that this is really like far from over, and I think to some extent I think there was a bit of a freak out yesterday, and partly because I think a lot of people were really unprepared for Biden doing this badly. I mean, it's funny because I wrote in my Newsday column last week, I wrote about those, misleadingly cropped videos. And I said, yeah, they're misleadingly cropped. They're not fake. They're not deep fakes. They are completely misleadingly edited, like to make it look like Biden is staring out, blankly into nothing when he's actually looking at a skydiver. I mean, that was ridiculous. And at the same time, like there are moments where I think you have to be concerned about his mental alertness. Like when there were several times when he was reading off the teleprompter and he read like a direction like pause or something, right? Remember that? Like there were several of those. Like he would be reading a text. Oh, you didn't follow that? Like,
No, I.
and he would just read
What for the State of the
one of
Union
the
or?
directions with the, thinking that it was part of the text. Now, like maybe it's something that could happen to anybody if you're doing a lot of like reading off the teleprompter, but and maybe if you're tired, whatever. I mean, I will tell you, like I have given public speeches, and I've occasionally like I've lost my
Well,
place in my notes. I mean, it's
we've only got 45 minutes left. Okay, so let's
yeah. All
try
right. So yeah,
and
let's get
so
back
I'll
to
let you.
GamerGate.
So yeah, I'll let you because I think there's value in it. With the election coming up, I think it's important. I'll give you just really quick, give you like a 2 minute explanation of like why you think people shouldn't vote for Trump or who they that they should vote for somebody else.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, okay. So why shouldn't they vote for Trump? Well, I mean, I do think that one of the um, paramount issues right now, and I don't want to sound pompous about, it's the preservation of our democracy. I was honestly, if you look at what I wrote about Trump in 2016, when he got elected, I didn't like him. I thought, he was kind of a sleazy character, and I thought some of his views were kind of nuts. And at the same time, I basically said, yeah, let's give him a chance. Maybe he'll be presidential. Like maybe he will kind of grow into the responsibility of the office and so on. And of course, I mean, this is a guy who is still defending, essentially trying to steal the election and presenting the people who were rioted on Capitol Hill as patriots. And I mean, yeah, you can sort of, what about that? What, oh, well, what about the riots of the summer of 2020? Well, Biden did condemn those. And I mean, he's not spinning for those people as patriots. So, I think it's really a different situation. And so I think that issue alone, I mean, I think that Trump, I mean, if you look at the sheer number of people who served in his administration who were saying that, this guy shouldn't be anywhere near the levers of power, I think that's impressive. And I mean, I think he has no respect for institutions. He's profoundly egotistical. He is, I think I don't know that he's going to be like a fascist, because I mean, we still have constraints. I don't think the Supreme Court, even with his appointees, is going to let him do whatever he wants. But I mean, is he at heart an authoritarian who would? I mean, I think there's a reason that he is so like friendly to Putin. It's not that he's Putin's agent or Putin's little bitch or whatever. But I mean, I think he really does admire these strongmen, and I think he kind of wishes that he could govern like that. Like apparently, when he was in the first term, he was just flabbergasted that he couldn't run the White House the way he runs his company, and like people don't automatically carry out his orders, and they can say, well, that's actually against the rules, sir, and we can't do that. So I mean, I think that he really has a profoundly sort of anti-democratic, with a small d, anti-liberal mentality, where if he could, he would run the country like an authoritarian state. I think it's deeply corrupt. And, for whatever I might agree with him on some issues, like, I mean, I liked what the Trump administration did with Title IX, for instance, and I don't like
Yeah, I agree with the Title
the
IX
regulations
reforms.
concerning like sexual harassment on
Hmm.
campus. I don't like the fact that the Biden administration has rolled these back. I mean, I could rattle off a bunch of other things where I disagree strongly with the Biden administration. I mean, I think the Biden administration
Well,
is a little too cozy with some of the social justice clauses. They probably have to
so
be.
let's
But,
get back
I
to.
have my issues. But I mean, I think that they're, can I just like take one
Okay,
more?
all right, one more minute. Go ahead.
I'm just going to give you an illustration. Do you know who PJ O'Rourke was? He was the sort of the satirist, the sort of libertarian
No, I'm not
satire
familiar.
guy. PJ O'Rourke, great, very interesting political. He died a few years ago, but I heard him speak in 2016 at a libertarian event, and he was talking about like why, as much as he doesn't like Hillary Clinton, he was urging people to vote for her. And he basically said, yeah, I mean, I think Hillary is really bad, but she's bad within normal parameters, and Trump is like in a completely different category, where I think he really does want to, there are a lot of people around him who want to burn down the institutions, and I think that's really dangerous. So that's my short answer.
So we've got two choices, Kathy. We can either try and rush through in 40 minutes and try and just hit the big questions, or we can schedule multiple parts. It's up to you.
Yeah, let's schedule a follow-up, because I
Okay.
think I
Okay.
do have to go at some point soon. But
So
yeah,
some of these
let's.
questions I don't think are going. Well, I'll just. So what do you think of the Gamers Are Dead articles? Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah. No, I think those were. I mean, first of all, I think they were coordinated, as you said. I mean, I generally don't believe in conspiracy theories, but in that case, as we found out, they really did kind of
Well,
discuss this
yeah,
crap
they
on.
they discussed trying to kill the story, and like they were trying to pressure
Right, right,
Greg Tito into censoring the escapist forums and to get people to stop talking about it. They don't. There's not like direct 100% proof that they're like, oh hey, I'm gonna write this article. 2 hours later, you followed up with your. It wasn't like that necessarily in the Game Journal Pros, but they
right.
almost certainly coordinated that. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too. I agree.
No, I don't think that there was like evil intent behind this. I think they really did believe that, oh, like here's Zoe Quinn being harassed. I think they were kind of, jumping in to stop what they saw as a harassment campaign. And I think they just went about it in a really high-handed way that was disrespectful of their audience, that was kind of very ideologically incurious, you know, in that they didn't look into the story. I think they went with a sort of ideologically driven stereotype of, oh, like here's this abusive ex-boyfriend, uh, you know, mounting a harassment campaign against a feminist
Well,
game
and
designer.
you mentioned this a little bit, but like this was sort of like a Me Too moment, right? Aaron Joni, like what he's talking
Yeah,
about is
yeah,
like,
a
hey,
Me
look,
Too
I'm in a
moment
horribly
before
abusive
Me Too.
relationship. I've been cheated on with 5 people. She's trying to claim that she's pregnant to keep me to stay with her, even though it's not
Right.
true, and all this stuff that like
Yeah, and it
normal
was
people would
also
look at as being
because
abusive. And
yeah, and it was also because not just because like she cheated on him with 5 people, but I think he actually showed messages where she had said that she considers it a violation of consent.
yes,
Like
true.
if you're in a relationship which you know you believe is monogamous, but in fact your partner is cheating on you, that really in a sense your consent is being violated because like you gave your consent to sex within a consensual relationship,
Yeah.
so this is sort of sex by deception. I'm not sure, by the way, that I like that reasoning because I think it really opens the way to like stretching the definition of non-consensual sex in a real like in really dangerous ways because like how many people practice like absolute honesty in every aspect of their relationship, and like
Well, they
if you could
should, but
say
you
that,
know,
if
yeah.
yeah, like if you can say that like anytime you have sex with someone without being aware of something that might have influenced you, you know, away from consent, if you knew about it, like I think we're really
Right.
opening up
That's
a
it
can
is
of
opening
worms
a
here.
dangerous. Yeah. I understand,
But
but
you know,
they
if that is Zoe's
mhm.
philosophy, then she should follow up on it.
When
And
she didn't want to talk about with Joshua Boggs because remember Aaron wanted to. God, we know way too much about this stuff. But Aaron wanted
right,
to tell Joshua Boggs' wife about the
yeah,
infidelity,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and she
So
didn't want
yeah,
to. That's why she wanted. That's
right,
part of what blew this up too.
right. Plus, you know, there were other things that were happening at the same time, and like I said, you know, there were so many different layers to
Fine
this.
young
Like, not
capitalists
many
and
people knew,
a
for
bunch of other
instance,
ethical
about the
violations.
whole thing with the Fine Young Capitalists incident, and that to me was something really shocking. It's something that painted Zoe Quinn as a harasser,
Mhm.
essentially, because like she, I see I'm having a Biden problem. Yeah, all right. I'm not going to stare blankly into the camera at least. So, anyway, so yeah, so Zoe, and your audience probably knows about this. Like, there was this startup that was doing a contest for female game designers where they wanted like women to submit ideas for a video game that where they would pick a winner and then
I
create
interviewed the
that.
winner,
Right. Yeah.
Reverend. She's great. She's cool.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great. Great. So yeah, and Zoe freaked out because one of their rules, which to me made complete sense, was like, yeah, we're open to transgender women, but you have to like have publicly identified yourself as transgender before you enter the contest. So you can't like, you know, like yesterday you were a guy and then like today you're sending in a an idea to this women only contest and saying, oh, by the way, like as of today, you
Well,
know,
and Zoe Quinn herself was trying to raise money at the time for Rebel Game Jam, her own
oh
competing
right, so she
organization,
was also
which
undercutting a
which
competitor.
also was a scam, and that never happened.
Oh, right, right. Yeah, as you said, and as I said, you know, there was just so much going on there. So she, as I remember, like she and a friend of hers started like bombarding this outfit, the Fine Young Capitalists, with so many messages that they crashed their site,
Well,
and they
so
were
she
using.
says it was an accidental DDoS, but then their site got hacked too.
Yeah, but
Oh,
then
the
she also kind of
Indiegogo
bragged
got
about
hacked.
it, and she said,
She
"Oh, like
did, yeah.
hey, like we accidentally
But
like you know brought down
Quinn's
this transphobic startup,"
I don't know if you
and
want to talk
she
about
accused them.
I don't know if you want. I don't know how much you want to talk about Quinn because like she's been discussed and like she's just basically a sociopath who destroys people's lives. She destroys Mr. Ray's
Yeah, yeah,
life. She destroys
basically.
Aaron Joni's
Yeah, and
life. She
she
just
also bad mouth. But I'm
Colin
just telling
Israel.
you,
So
like
many
what.
different people. She's had so many victims. Maddie Lesham, um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
the financial
yeah.
capitalist, Matthew
Yeah, yeah,
Rappard.
no, I'm just
So
telling you
it's
like
just
what drew. I'm
yeah.
telling you what drew my
Okay.
attention
Well, I'm
to
just
this
yeah. I'm
because
just
that
okay.
was one of the things that really caught
We'll
my
be here all
attention.
day though with
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Quinn's
right.
story.
I know, but
Unfortunately.
yeah, but it was like like here is this sort of you know almost classic case of somebody going after somebody else on a pretext of like social justice
Hmm.
thought policing essentially because she was like oh like how dare you like and I think she referred to this as like transition points policing and I like wow this is impressive and like I think she told several people like don't promote this contest because it's transphobic and yeah I mean that just really made me see that yeah like she is not one of the good guys here
Yeah.
and then I know that she also went after Liana Kursner and
Yeah.
tried to undermine her yeah we're not
Well,
gonna
actually, so Liana talked about that a little bit, but we didn't get to the details. I don't know the full story. What all happened with Liana and Zoe?
yeah this is pretty convoluted stuff but yeah like just to make a long story short I think the upshot of it was that yeah there was bad behavior that was going on across the board and I think the standard media narrative really tried to conflate all of Gamergate which was this pushback a lot of which was justified in my opinion against the attempt to bring these, very restrictive sort of social justice ideas into gaming, where it was like stuff like, don't show women, don't have female characters with like, large breasts. Or there were these stupid complaints about video games. Like, do you remember the controversy? And I mentioned it in one of my articles about the Catwoman like what was it like it was a separate it was like what do you call it like extension or something to the
DLC
Batman
or
to, to the Arkham Asylum game
I'm not
where
familiar
it was
actually. I haven't read all your
yeah
articles though,
oh
or I might have read all your articles about
right
Gamergate, but it's been a long
well
time.
it was a Batwoman like you could have an adventure like playing as Batwoman and I'm sorry not Batwoman Catwoman sorry it's yeah Catwoman not Batwoman obviously so yeah you could have an adventure playing as Catwoman uh like it was a side quest or something like that so there was a backlash against it in the gaming press uh because like at one point when Catwoman is fighting a bunch of thugs in prison in a prison in a maximum security prison or something uh several of them call her a bitch and it was like oh my god you have this misogynistic language directed at a female character and yeah like they're criminals whom she beats the stuffing out of in that same scene it's like they're not good guys the game is not endorsing their language it's like it's sort of showcasing them as bad guys who are about to get beaten up by her and I think there was also like language that some people said was a rape threat like uh, and again and it was something like and it wasn't even a rape threat. It was something like, "Oh, you're mine, Catwoman," uh, and and then of course she beats the crap out of this guy. And I think somebody who was responding to this pointed out that there's like equally bad language directed at Batman in the like main portion of the same game, where like somebody like one of the guys that he's fighting says, "I'm gonna make you my little bitch, Batman," which is, I mean, that's an even more overt rape threat if you really want to quibble. And it also uses the word bitch, but it was directed at a male character. So yeah, so there was this a huge outcry in several. I think it was in Kotaku, it was in Polygon. Like there were several of these publications that were like, "Oh my God, there is this like, yeah, you can play as Catwoman, but it's so like you're gonna get a lot of misogyny, and this is really bad." And then, of course, the next game that the same company did, like the same Batman-based game, they didn't do a Catwoman option, and and several people were actually, oh, like cool, like we scared them off because
Yeah, there
they
were a lot
were
of
doing.
cases like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so now you don't have an option of playing as a female character because somebody thought that, criminals calling the female character a bitch before being, beaten into the ground by her was misogynistic. Great. So yeah, there was just a lot of this really stupid like language policing and a lot, stuff like that, and stuff, things being labeled as rape culture because there were sexy women involved and whatnot, and it just seemed to me like there was a completely justified pushback against this attempt to bring a very limiting ideology into gaming. And there was a kind of groupthink in the sort of elite gaming press where you were supposed to look at games from this same point of view, and like everything had to be political, like you always had to be aware of the social justice aspects of whatever you were writing about, like if it was Bayonetta, oh, I think didn't Anita Sarkeesian call her a fuck toy or something,
I
you know
don't recall. I wasn't really a
something
culture warrior.
like that. Yeah.
Still not.
So, and I'm not saying obviously that justifies, death threats to Anita Sarkeesian, but, she has disappeared, by the way. I haven't seen
Well,
anything.
she's going to be at this conference in Detroit, this GamerGate conference. I've interviewed the
Oh, there's a,
organizers. They're
oh,
so it's unfortunately, and I've interviewed Paul Johnson and Stephen Mallory, the people organizing this conference at Lawrence Technological University in Detroit. Uh, they are hosting a conference about GamerGate. Unfortunately, only one side is presented. Um,
well,
but I talked with the organizers, Paul Johnson, and his partner Stephen Mallory. Stephen's very hostile to GamerGate. He's openly anti-GamerGate.
mhm.
Um, but Paul, maybe he's a little bit more moderate. I don't think he went in to try and fuck with the GamerGate people. I don't think he knew there was another side. But now
Oh,
he's not willing to do the right thing and correct it. Unfortunately,
oh, that's unfortunate.
yeah.
And when is this
He
taking
did talk
place?
with me though. September.
Oh, okay.
You can watch
Well,
my interview with them if you want. It's on my
oh, all
channel.
right, all right. Well, I will keep that in mind. Like maybe I will write something about it. I mean, it's so close to the election; it's going to be crazy. I'm not going to have time for anything else, probably. But we'll see. I may be able to, write something.
I'd be
So,
interested in seeing that article. I think a lot of people would.
yeah. Well, I will. As I said, I will do my best. Because I think it would be an interesting kind of thing to do in retrospective.
You should also write
Yeah,
one about my project. That'd be interesting too,
oh yeah, yeah. Well,
if
if
you
I do
want.
write about it, I will definitely mention your project. So, yeah. So it's unfortunate, but see, that is the sort of thing that made me get involved in writing about GamerGate because I was really, really put off by the one-sided media coverage, and I think that was what kind of drew my attention. And I just thought, there was a need to set the record straight, and because I thought the unfortunate thing was that the coverage was so polarized between, like, there were a few people like Milo who were using Gamergate for their own agenda, and I think it's pretty clear, again, in retrospect, that
Hmm.
Milo was kind of using Gamergate for his own whatever, and I think he did later try to essentially use, well, he and Ethan Ralph, I think, were essentially trying to use Gamergate to recruit people into the alt right, and that
Well,
yeah, I mean,
Ralph, I actually know I've got Ralph's private chat logs. So I don't think he was like trying to recruit people into the alt right necessarily. Like, as Ralph was a piece of shit. He supported
yeah,
people engaging in harassment. He engaged in harassment himself. Not a good person by any stretch. But if you read like his private chat logs, from like 2016, I think. I don't know the exact dates. If I could pull it up
Oh,
if you want. But um, he basically talks about his transition. And he's like, and he talks about he's like, but he didn't really want to like turn GamerGaters into far right people. I don't think. If you read his chat logs, because he's like fuck GamerGate, I'm done with these fucking assholes. Because he
oh
was
yeah,
fighting
yeah,
with a
yeah,
bunch of people
maybe.
and stuff, and then he
Right,
later, like at the same time period, he was like, well, you know what, I'm gonna go jump into politics and work with Milo, and that's gonna be my
right,
shtick.
right, right.
So like, I
Yeah,
don't
no,
think it was like a,
I
I'm gonna
actually,
bring them on board. I think it was more of a like he burnt those
yeah,
bridges and
I
then
did
he
read, I did read some of that. I mean, I may be wrong about because it was a while back,
hmm.
and so much has happened since then. I mean, I thought Ralph was also interested in bringing people over, but maybe not. Milo, I think, definitely was.
Milo was, yeah.
Yeah, 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 and I think even like Steve Bannon, I think, was kind of behind that, at least not maybe to the extent that it was his idea, but I think he definitely knew that Milo was doing this, and I think he was kind of interested in using Gamergate as a kind of breeding ground for far right activists. I don't know to what extent that
So
was successful. I
that's
mean, I'm sure that
so
some people went
that's
over.
so sorry I cut you off, but I do
No,
want to
no,
ask
go
you.
ahead.
So how successful do you think they were? Because like you have like these articles for like Asia Romano at Vox, who actually ran away from an interview with me after agreeing to do one. So she writes in her article, and a bunch of other people have written articles too. There's also videos out there. Innuendo Studios has a video claiming this. So does Pinko Merchant, who I've interviewed. It's this big claim that GamerGate got Trump elected, or that there's like a gamer to alt right pipeline, and like all this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stuff.
I mean, that's like, but it's funny because this is part of all these things being blamed on Gamergate. Like, remember when you probably caught this when there were like jokes about the Gamergate time machine? Like,
Yes.
Gamergate went back in time and started World War One and World War Two, right? And Gamergate elected Hitler, no doubt. So,
Oh no, it's
uh,
gonna kick us out in 10 minutes again. Why the hell is it doing this? You can only do 40-minute
Oh,
meetings in
because
Zoom.
it's limited. I think if you don't have a pro account, it
Oh
limits you
my
to
god.
40 minute clips.
I'm gonna lose
Uh,
my mind. I'm gonna off myself in Minecraft because of this.
well, but that's okay. I mean, I think we can. Um, do you want to wrap up in 10 minutes
It's
and
up to you.
then do
I
the
can keep
next
going.
round?
I got my evening clear, so it's up to you.
Okay, well, we can do a little more, we'll see. Yeah, so I think that, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous to claim that Gamergate elected Trump. I mean, how many people were there involved in Gamergate, like at its height?
I Yeah, 10,000. Let's say you
10,000
even say
people.
let's
So,
say
yeah,
you
yeah,
even say like people who are sympathetic to it, like, and you have like a few million, maybe,
yeah, and I think
maybe.
wasn't there like weren't there actual, I think, what's his name, Brad Glasgow,
Yeah, he
who
did
did.
research. Well, it's mostly liberals, so like
Yeah, yeah. And
that's what
it's
my research
interesting
found
because
too. So
who wrote about this? And I think I mentioned that in one of my pieces. Matt Iglesias did a piece early on about Gamergate, where he basically said, yeah, I don't think this is a right wing movement. I think it's like a lot of it is basically like people who are basically liberal, but they just don't see like why all of a sudden they're being yelled at because they kind of, like to have sexy women with large breasts in their video games or something
was
like
that
that.
was that Iglesias or was that Ezra Klein?
Or maybe it was Ezra Klein.
Because it
Was
was
it
a
Ezra?
Vox article. Yeah, I did a response video
Oh,
to
you
his
know what?
article
Yeah, I think you're right.
at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. No,
Which I
I
mean, he
did. Yeah.
actually did as far as in my
And
first
he was
post.
right. And I
I
think he was
reference him
one
as
of the
being
very few
he
people
tried to be
to
fair. He tried to
acknowledge.
be fair in how he covered it.
Yeah,
He was one of
yeah,
the handful of people who were.
yeah, yeah. So that was impressive. And, and I think he was right. And again, like Brad's research showed that that was the case, that for the most part, these were people who were liberal on pretty much everything. And like a lot of, like most of them were Obama voters. I was told eventually that like by maybe 2017, 18, somebody told me that like maybe half of the people on Kotaku in Action were pro-Trump. I don't
Oh,
know
on
if that's
Kotaku in
true,
action, I wouldn't be surprised. So Kotaku in
but
action
even
is
there,
become very is become I don't know about very, but it's become like more right wing over time.
Yeah. No, that's what I was told
But we do know
by a
how the
couple of people.
people. I don't. We do actually have data because I've collected it. The optional survey. I'm sure you remember sending you that.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
did you actually fill it out?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I filled
So.
it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So. In that optional survey, you know how I asked people a battery of questions, and I also asked them about the elections that they voted in.
Yeah.
And so I actually know how people are going to vote in the upcoming election. Well, in theory, right? So among the pro GamerGate people who are Americans, so that's
Yeah.
already like a subset. But of
Yeah.
so it looks like about 30% are going for Trump, about 30% are going for Biden, and there's a very large 40% category. Well, it's actually multiple categories that are like either Libertarian Party or Green
Oh
Party
yeah.
or undecided. But I just lump
Right.
all that together. People who are like undecided are going third party, or there's like one person I think who's not going to vote. So
Right.
that's also in that
Right.
category too. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me one bit because I mean I do think that Gamergate kind of tend to draw anti-establishment people to some extent
Mhm.
because like they're they're internet nerds like for one thing, and I think there's a kind of built-in like anti-establishment mindset there. Uh, but I mean I don't think a lot of them are like in this like burn everything down.
No, there's some people
Mentality
who are
toward
like
it.
that. There's a couple people I've
There's
interviewed
some.
like that, but it's not like a no.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of pessimism towards media. I'll say this. A lot of the people I interview, and they'll even tell you straight up, they're like, "Look, I don't trust what I read in the news anymore. I just don't. I always have to, double check or, which is probably good, or they just don't believe
Yeah.
it, right? Anything that
Yeah,
they
I
read.
mean, I think it's very dicey because I think skepticism is healthy.
Hmm.
It's just like when you get to the point where you consider like Alex Jones and like in the New York Times to be equally trustworthy. Like
Right.
for all the issues I have with the New York Times, I think that is nuts.
So
Yeah, and this is, I mean, to some extent, I think it's true that it's the fault of the media, but I think there is also um, a kind of deliberate campaign to, buy people on the fringes to kind of, create so much fog and, smoke and mirrors that, nobody can really figure out where the truth is anymore. So I think there's a kind of, there's a lot of blame to go around. But, I do think that to some extent the media have, fucked up enough that, a lot of people, the trust is justifiably undermined, even if it goes too far. So I think the media definitely need to do a better job. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
Gamergate was one story where that was definitely true, and I think it's just when being skeptical, people shouldn't like lose their minds and and start trusting either like Alex Jones or Kremlin propaganda, and, people like Jason Hinkle. Do you know who Jason Hinkle is?
I'm vaguely familiar with him. He's like
Oh
a
God,
yeah.
it's like this
Well,
nutty guy
Ian
who is
Miles
like,
Chung. He's a Russian propagandist, the big
oh my
anti-GamerGate
God,
guy
Well,
who ran
Jason Hinkle is
GameRanks.
like an even crazier Ian Miles Chung. Like
Ian Miles
he's
Chung ran away from an interview too. He agreed to do it, and then once he realized, because I was open and I was upfront, I'm like, "Hey, look, I'm going to ask
right.
you some tough questions," and he ghosted me after he heard
Uh,
that. Oh
well,
no,
I could tell you a funny story about Ian if
sure,
you
yeah. We
all
have
right.
3 minutes before
So
it kicks us
yeah,
out. Then we have
because
to rejoin.
Ian
So
had this bizarre history, right? You know
he
that where he
does. He's
started out as a Nazi, then he became very far left and was like anti Gamergate and really like very militantly anti Gamergate. Where I think he posted some, didn't he post some stuff about like how he wanted to see a lot of Gamergate people killed or something
I
nutty like
don't
that.
probably I don't
Yeah,
I can't
I'm not
verify
sure,
that
so don't
specific clip.
like.
So,
Yeah,
but
I'm
he said a
not.
lot of crazy
I will
shit. He
not.
he tweeted about it like every day. If you look at his Twitter feed, and he just like
Oh
search Gamergate, it's
yeah,
like every day there's like 5 tweets like the
yeah,
Gamergaters or
yeah.
some crazy
So
shit.
yeah, Gamergaters are completely evil. So then he goes over to the pro Gamergate side, and for a while he kind of seemed like fairly normal there. Like anyway, so I was in a chat room uh where he was. Uh And this was at the time of the Charlottesville rally. When what's her name? Heather Heyer was killed, right? The woman
I
who
don't remember
was,
her name,
who
but
was
yes,
struck by a car
tragic
during the
situation.
Charlottesville
Yes.
rally. And Ian was in this Twitter chat room that I was in, and he was at the time, like, he was circulating a rumor that the guy who killed her was actually Antifa. And I said, like, Ian, wait a minute, like, this is completely unconfirmed. This is just some guy on Twitter who has, thrown out this rumor that it's an Antifa guy. And, you don't have any evidence. Like, you're essentially like accusing someone of murder with no evidence whatsoever. And like, why are you doing this? And his response was basically, yeah, well, the mainstream media, like the MSM, like, they instantly jumped on the narrative that it must have been a far right guy. So I think we need to, like, counter that, even if we don't have all the even if we don't have all the evidence lined up. And, like, all right, well, that kind of tells me everything I need to know about you, Ian. Like, nice knowing you. And I actually left that chat room, and I was like, all right, well, do whatever you
Well,
want,
now
but
he's
I'm not.
paid by Russia Today. So he's paid by
Oh
Russia
yeah,
Today. If you
yeah,
read it, look, you can go and read his articles. He
yeah.
writes
No,
about
I know.
Ukraine. He writes
I'll
about
tell you.
all.
Yeah, let's come back because it's about to kick us off. But I want to tell you the punchline for my
All right.
interactions with Ian, because there's a little funny little story there. I'll leave it for after we get kicked out.
Or we can
Listen.
close it and then rejoin with a new one, right? New link or same link.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm
Let
gonna.
me just close this now, and then just send me a new link.
Okay.
All right.
All right, we're back. Another 40 minutes, but well, we don't have to go that long. I know you said you
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to,
Well,
but
I'll probably leave before that. But anyhow, so yeah, so Ian, at one point, and you know what, this may even still be in my DMs. I could try and find it. But at one point, Ian, I can't remember when this was, but it was, gosh, was it after January 6th? Anyway, like, at one point, Ian actually sent me a message saying, like, oh my God, you were right about everything. And, like, I was really like, blind to a lot of the stuff that was going on. And I was all right. So maybe he's, like, switching sides again. And then he got the job with, I think it was Human Events, right? At first, he got a job with some really far right website, and then I guess he decided to stay with that side after all. But I think he was putting out feelers about, like, switching sides again. I mean, I don't know if he's an opportunist or what,
well, he
but
switched
I
sides like
mean,
5 times now.
yeah,
Wait, he was so
yeah,
he was a
it's
Nazi, social justice warrior, anti-social justice warrior, far right, Russian, literally working for a Russian government. Like I
yeah,
feel like
no,
yeah.
it's
I don't. And
yeah,
plus,
like,
if you
what
look at, he's
next,
never
right?
behaved ethically, right, the whole time. So
No,
when he
no.
was, well, maybe when he was a Nazi, he was ethical, I guess. Like insofar as you can be like an ethical Nazi.
That was the real
But
Ian, the
that
Nazi.
I
Yeah, who
but
knows?
like during when he was an SJW, right? His big thing was he lied about GamerGate all the time.
Oh
Then
yeah, of
when
course.
he was an anti-SJW, I guess he's lying about Charlottesville. And then when he's a Russian propagandist, he's lying about Ukraine. He's
Oh
lying about
well, yeah,
January 6th.
that's I mean, the
Like
lying
at this point, I think the guy just
lying
needs to
is
go
part
take
of
a
the
long
job
walk off a
description.
short pier, which
Yeah.
is to say,
No,
like,
Jason
he needs
Hinkle
to
is
go get a
this
job
amazing
working at
character.
McDonald's in Malaysia because he's never
Yeah,
been
yeah.
to America. He doesn't.
Yeah,
He should be
no, it's
done.
bizarre.
You know,
Yeah. But I mean, because I see
he can
people,
go
like,
make
I
my
occasionally
clothes
see
in
people.
Malaysia at a factory.
Yeah. No, I occasionally see, like, people that I, respect, like, trying to argue with Ian. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, why would he even dignify this guy with, arguing with him? Because, like he's like the definition of bad faith. like, um, anyway, yeah. So there are these characters who are, I mean, there are just so many people who have been around Gamergate, and I mean, there are people whose careers have taken really strange turns, like Brianna Wu, who all of a sudden is like, is on the like anti-social justice side in this
So
case.
she's yeah. I've actually talked with her. We
I think
talked
you
about this
mentioned that,
the Sweet Baby
right?
Ink controversy. Wick had a panel. I was a guest. So was Brianna. A few other people. She's a liberal now. I still don't trust her necessarily. I don't think she trusts me. We do not get along super great. Which yeah, that's what it is.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, like Brianna, I actually I emailed her once for comments because she agreed to give me comments for my 5-year anniversary piece. And I can't remember. I'll have to take a look at it because I remember that at some point she just kind of got really hostile in her emails and just kind of blew me off. Because the thing that I thought was interesting, and I think, and that really made me feel like she is not credible. Um, she tried to claim like she wrote a 5-year anniversary piece. I think she actually had like she was part of several op-eds in the New York
The
Times.
four. I was going to ask you about that. Thank you
Right.
for bringing it back up.
Yeah, yeah. And she mentioned the thing that really kind of blew my mind was that she mentioned among the like supposed harassment that she endured, like that incident where the guy said he was driving out to her place to kill her.
So
And she knows, I mean, by now she certainly knows that that guy was not a gamer gator, but he was like anti gamergate trying to do like a parody of a crazy gamer, right? So he
well,
was like, he was trying to.
this. So I'm sorry, I'm laughing because she's done this multiple times. So, um, the RavenCon, she also used that example as well as her like flight. So there's been a major drama incident in the political world recently because one of the political live streamers, Queeman, made a big video going over some of the lies that she's told over the past several years in his
Hmm,
estimation. And that's one of the ones
right.
he cited in there actually. Plus when she lied about John Bain, Total Biscuit. But
Oh
he
yeah, yeah,
also
yeah.
she ended up debating Queeman um, about whether or not she lied about all this stuff. And that
Oh
was one of the
God.
big examples that they talked about for a couple, I don't know how long, some amount of time.
No, I know, but I
It's
find
like two
myself
weeks
in this
ago.
funny position. I find myself in this funny position because I'm looking at like, oh my God, am I gonna like retweet this tweet by Brianna Wu, who is making total sense here? This is
Yeah,
so bizarre.
she's moderate now. She says a lot of stuff that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. She said
But
she
she also
she,
still
she
doesn't really
says
own the
reasonable
past.
things,
So and also
but
like
as
or
you said,
apologize.
yeah, as you said, I don't think she's trustworthy. I mean, I think she I mean, I don't know, like, what do you think of that whole? Because there was, I mean, I know you're the one supposed to be who's supposed to be asking me questions, but what do you think of that whole controversy where some people claim that she never left her house, right?
Oh
Like,
no. So I've actually covered this in the book. I don't think I. So let me just
yeah,
lay
because
out.
the claim was that she had to leave her home after her address was
Right.
publicly
So
posted, right?
uh,
And then
do you,
somebody said, well, if you look at the what you're seeing out the window in
I'll
one of
send
her
you a bunch of
videos,
evidence, and so I'll send you the
she's
evidence
still
I've
at
got on
home.
this. Basically, probably not. Um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but like we'll never know for sure, probably. So her
Yeah,
claim.
and this
Let
is
me
the
just
kind of
explain.
thing where I
Can I?
really would rather err on the side of like not accusing someone
Right.
of lying
Right. I
about.
tried to be really careful in how I talk about it, but
I
so
mean, like it's
TL. Do
kind of like
you want to give
accusing
you the
someone of.
TLDR on it, just like this of the evidence, and then you can make your own
Yeah,
decision.
yeah, no, it's very dicey. I mean, it's
Okay.
kind of like I don't know, like accusing somebody of lying about being raped.
Basically,
You really hate to
yeah,
be like
yeah, you have to be really careful
in a
with it.
position
But
where you're
so,
wrong and you.
but there is a lot of like reasons to think that like maybe it wasn't. true. Because like so basically before the harassment, right? Before she got this harassment
Right.
messages, she made this account called Bro Lols, which is this sock
Oh
puppet
yeah,
troll
yeah.
account.
No, I know
And
about
then she
that.
used the Bro Lols account to troll the GamerGaters, and then she later said it was satire, right? And then
Right.
she also then she announces months in advance that she's going to be speaking at New York Comic Con, that she's got a panelist there, right? And
Right.
so the weekend of New York Comic Con, she gets the tweet from the Death to Brianna Wu Twitter account. The Death to Brianna Wu Twitter account posts an address, presumably hers,
Right.
and says, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to shove a K-bar up your cunt or something. It said, some unhinged crazy shit.
Yeah.
Um, and so she likes and retweets this account, and she says, remember guys, GamerGate's not about harassment. I'm fleeing my home. Uh,
Uh-huh. Right. Right. Right.
kind of a weird thing to say as you're I don't know. But anyway, she tweets that out, and then she goes to New York Comic Con, and then she tweets out about how she's at New York Comic Con that weekend, the same weekend she fled her home, because she fled on a Friday. Um,
Right.
so then, so she's tweeting about so she does go to the convention where she was scheduled to speak at. Which
Right.
but maybe she's like, hey, look, I'm going to go here anyway. They're gonna have security at the convention, right? So I feel safe. And she wants to meet up with
Yeah.
people there, and it's a networking event, stuff like that, right? So then she says she's homeless. She tweets all this stuff out about how she's homeless now and she's living in terror from the GamerGate people. And then and
Right.
then she does was it 5 or 6? I think let's just say 5 for now. I have the full receipts, but if I close this window, it's gonna be a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll send it to you later. But then she does 5 interviews over the course of the next 3 months from her house, and like she can actually tell because like the background decorations and stuff of the
Right.
room she's at are the same as previous photos she shared of her home.
Right. Right.
And so but she says she has an explanation for this actually. She says that because she was asked about it on the Stitch and Adams show, and
Uh-huh.
so she said there that what happened is that she fled her home, was homeless, and then came back home to do the interviews because it was like an easy way to access a computer. And so during this period, she was really homeless. She really was living in terror from the GamerGate people. And she just went home during those 5 occasions to do the interviews. But the interviews were live streamed interviews. They weren't like in person.
Right.
So I don't know if you believe that
Yeah.
story or
Yeah.
not,
Who
but
knows?
that's
I mean, as I said, it's a little
yeah,
dicey. Yeah. So yeah, but it's like people's careers have really taken some strange directions. So
yes, true. Well, your
yeah.
your career, like you're what, like you're like one of the main what anti or pro Ukraine people now, right, on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know about Maine. I mean, I've sometimes criticized. I mean, I'm not like one of the people who are like everything that Ukrainian, activists do is righteous and so on. Like, because there's times when like there's a contingent of like pro-Ukraine people who tend to be really kind of not just anti-Russia in terms of like the Putin regime, but like they really hate like everything that's associated with Russia, and whether it's Russian culture or whether it's individual Russians who may even live like outside Russia, including like the thing that really kind of got to me was when they got really nasty. Like this is when Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader who later was murdered, was still alive, and but he was in prison. And the documentary about him, Navalny, got an Oscar. And there was a bunch of people who were in the pro-Ukrainian camp who were like, "Oh, like how outrageous that they would give this Oscar to a movie about a Russian who, at one point, and it's true that like at one point Navalny was sort of a Russian nationalist who originally was not very supportive of Ukraine. He completely changed his position on that later on. And he, part of the reason, by the way, that he was sent to prison and was given the very long term that he got was that while he was sort of on probation, he spoke out against the war in Ukraine. So, and I wrote a couple of pieces about that. And I basically said, I understand, like, okay, like if you're Ukrainian, whose house has just been bombed, and you're standing there saying, "Oh my God, I really hate all Russians. I wish the bastards would all die." I'm certainly not going to criticize you for that, because that's like, just like I would not blame, like, if this is like 1946 and you find out that your entire family has been killed in a Nazi concentration camp, and you say, like, "Fuck all Germans," like, I really wish like every last German would just die a horrible death. I don't think that makes you a bigot. But on the other hand, if you're a person living comfortably in the West and, supporting Ukraine, which is good, and, tweeting like, "Haha, serves them right," when, there was an incident when a Russian tourist, I don't know if you followed that, like a Russian tourist who was not even like living in Russia. I think he was like living outside Russia, and he was in Australia, and he was like eaten by a shark, like literally like killed by a shark while his father was watching from the beach. And there were like, again, this is not the majority of Ukraine supporters, but there was like a certain contingent of people who were like, "Oh, like, haha, let's give the shark a medal or something." I'm like,
Yeah.
guys,
No, there.
this is
Yeah.
really
I'm not. I don't
offensive.
support that kind of thing. Yeah.
And
I'm
yeah, yeah,
extremely
yeah.
pro
And so
Ukraine,
I've
but
written about that.
I don't.
I've written about that,
I'm not
and
anti-Russian
and
people. I'm pro-Russian people having freedom and democracy too.
yeah, yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't like that. Like, there's a certain, again, like, there's a certain contingent that will say things like, "Oh, well, slavery is in the blood of Russians, and it's like in their DNA, and they can never change." No, 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 no. I mean, if Japan could change, if Germany, I mean, Japan was this incredibly imperialistic country that did horrible, horrible things in China, during the occupation. I mean, it kind of makes anything that Russia is doing in Ukraine today really kind of pale by comparison. If Germany could, I mean, almost every country has some. I mean, our history is certainly not perfect with regard to, Native Americans, blacks. I don't think there is a perfect country. Obviously there is no perfect culture. I think cultures and countries change, and to just say, "Oh, well, screw all Russians, they're all evil." And I've written about the question of whether Putin's war is actually popular with Russians, which is a very complicated question, because right now you can't really trust anything that the Russians say in the polls, because everyone's afraid. Like, but anyway, we're getting really
Yeah.
we're wandering far away from the topic. But yeah, I mean, I do think that overall, despite some of these like excesses, I think it is a very righteous cause. I mean, I think it is a fight for freedom in our time. I don't think we should be, like, in terms of funding for the war, I don't want us going into like other countries trying to export democracy to places that are not very interested in it, like, which is, I think, what happened in Iraq, where there was a culture that for the most part really was not that like oriented toward democracy. And I think what happened, I mean, Saddam was horrible, but I mean, I think what happened when he was toppled was that sort of it just collapsed into tribal
Oh well,
warfare and
we could
religious
probably talk about
warfare.
the
But
Iraq
yeah,
War
we
for
could
like two
we could
hours,
get into
which we
that.
can
But
sometime if you want. I'm
Ukraine
down,
is a
but
country that actually does, has aspired toward democracy. And I don't buy this narrative that the revolution of 2014 was this American engineered coup. I look pretty closely into these claims. They're very, very off base. I mean, I think this was a completely grassroots movement that existed really from the 1990s. I mean, I think there's always been a kind of pro-independence history in Ukraine. um I could get into this whole stuff about all the stuff about Ukrainian Nazis. I mean, yeah, there's extremists that are kind of, any nationalist movement is going to have an extreme wing that kind of overlaps with Nazis. Certainly true in Russia. I mean, there is a Nazi sort of style Russian battalion that is fighting in Ukraine on the Russian side.
well, the
So,
Wagner Group
and
basically like
let's not
is
even get into
got a
the
lot of
Wagner group.
yeah.
So yeah, so I think that, I mean, a lot of it is kind of like the common thread related to like my work on Gamergate and my work on some of these issues is that I really do try to like debunk false narratives and get to the facts that I really do. I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I think I really do try to like get to the facts whether or not they're favorable to like my side.
No, I
I mean,
I actually cited you recently because Kraut, you know Kraut the YouTuber.
yeah, yeah,
So I interviewed him. He was involved with Gamergate too, albeit only very
right.
lightly. But I interviewed him, and he talked about Gonzalo Lira, Coach Red Pill,
Oh yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
guy who got sick. Uh, he said that he was spreading Russian. Kraut said that he thought that Lira was spreading Ukrainian troop movement in positions.
I don't.
But
Well,
you
that's
looked
he
into
was
that.
accused of.
You looked into that. That's actually not true. So I issued a correction on
Yeah,
my
and this
video.
is something where this would be sort of, a claim on my side, so to speak.
Right.
But yeah, I looked into it. I mean, I think he was
He was an asshole
uh
and a propagandist, to be
he was an
clear. But
asshole. He was, yeah. And I mean,
but
look,
that
I mean,
specific
you
claim.
go to a country, you go to a country that is fighting against an invasion, and you start like propaganda shilling for the invader, you're kind of asking for trouble. That is not something that I mean, what would, I'm pretty sure that, like, if you were a foreigner who came to the United States during World War II and started going around like, oh, well, actually, Hitler is kind of great, and, like, he's not our
Well,
enemy.
I don't know. You
And
say that, but like, look how many people were unjustly imprisoned because they protested World War One, right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, I mean, wars are not a friendly like wars are not a friendly setting for free speech, generally speaking. And there were I mean, hey, war, generally speaking, civil liberties do not fare well during wars. I mean, look at what we did to the Japanese Americans,
Yeah.
which wasn't even like for expressing their viewpoints. It was just for being Japanese American. And yeah, so I mean, I certainly like when people go like, oh, Zelensky is a dictator and, he's imprisoning, priests. And it's a very, like, I looked into that whole story. Like, there's a hugely complicated setup where there's the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has two different branches, sort of. One of which is very closely enmeshed and essentially controlled by the Moscow, like the Moscow Patriarchate, which is like the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church, which essentially works for Putin, basically. And and the head of the Russian Orthodox Church is I think there's a general consensus that he's a guy with a long career in the KGB, like starting back in the Soviet days. So yeah, so there's a branch of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church which is subordinate to the Russian Church, essentially, and they kind of claim to be independent. They still have a lot of ties. A lot of them, like there are priests in that church who are essentially like Russian agents. So yeah, I mean, I think that again, like during a war, people like that are gonna find themselves like shut down sometimes. I don't think like they've executed anyone, but I think they have shut down some churches where they claim that they claimed were being used as recruiting centers and just sort of aid centers for the invasion. Um, I don't see any evidence that there's like, churches being persecuted because they uh espouse the wrong view. And that there's I don't again, like, I don't agree with everything that the Ukrainian government is doing, as part of the war. I mean, I think that they like some of the curbs on publication in Russian, I think, are wrong because there is a large Russian speaking population. And I think they should be able to have newspapers and whatnot in Russian. Um,
Had
is
they
it
banned like Russian language newspapers?
yeah, because I think they have some pretty stringent regulations about like well, like I think every Russian language newspaper that is published now has to have like a version in Ukrainian. Like, and I don't know why. I mean, because I don't think it's just to know what they're writing. I think it's really to kind of discourage the
Mhm.
publication of discourage Russian language media, because obviously it's incredibly expensive. If like every issue of a newspaper that you print, you have to basically print like a second
Sure.
issue, like a second version in Ukrainian. So I think that's, and I think actually the ironic thing is that if they do join the EU, which they're trying to do, I think they're going to have to get rid of some of that because
Oh yeah, for
it's
sure.
at odds with EU regulations on freedom of the press. So is it bad? Yeah, I mean I agree. I think that again a lot of the time, like when people are at war, and especially if you're fighting back against an invasion, if 20% of your country is being occupied, yeah, like you're probably not going to be very nice at some points. And you know it's you're trying to counteract essentially enemy propaganda during an invasion. It's very dicey. It's I don't think everything that they're doing is necessarily very smart or very justified. But yeah, just the sense of perspective. If you look at what's going on in Russia right now, where like the latest is that they just put some 15-year-old kid in a juvenile penal colony for 5 years for like putting anti-Putin leaflets into his neighbors' mailboxes. And I mean, they were leaflets that it was before this, fake election that they had, where the leaflets basically said, like, is this the guy you really want to be a president? And like this kid is now going to a penal colony for 5 years, which is just horrifying. And I actually one of the things that I'm planning to do maybe next week, because we'll see what's going on with all the stuff about, the debate. But it just annoys me sort of that a lot of like the people who are always kind of carrying on about the persecution of religion in Ukraine are never really saying anything about the persecution of, let's say, like there are anti-war priests in Russia who have been either defrocked and kept from serving as priests or have actually been jailed. There are cases like they're persecuting both Catholic priests and anti-war Orthodox priests in the occupied parts of Ukraine. So there's a lot of like really really bad stuff that is being done to priests by and religious people by Russia that is not getting a lot of exposure. So I'm probably going to write about that. So yeah, I am writing about Ukraine a lot, as you said. I'm trying to do a little bit of everything because I'm still writing about social justice issues. I mean, I'm probably I'm one thing that really frustrates me, by the way, is that a lot of people who are critical, rightly critical of the social justice left, have tended to drift over toward the kind of the Trumpian right, or at least the anti-Trump, a niche. And I don't know if you saw the piece that I wrote about the intellectual dark web.
No, I
That
I haven't. I don't.
what was that?
But
Oh, I should send.
do you want to go into that, or do you want to like bring it back to GamerGate?
Yeah, it's a little bit related, I guess,
Okay.
because
Right.
but let's go back to Gamergate because but I
We can
just want
talk
to,
again. We
it's
can.
just it's kind of related
I'm a
because
pretty open book.
there does seem to be like a tendency for people who are critical of the like I said, who are critical of progressivism or wokeness or whatever. I just get very, very discouraged when I see like more and more people who used to be pretty sane, like suddenly taking this attitude that, oh, hey, well, maybe Trump isn't so bad. And I remember having these arguments, by the way, with a few people from Gamergate. Well, this brings us back to Gamergate because I remember that in 2016, I was having some really ferocious arguments online with some GamerGate people who were like, "Well, don't you see that Trump is, fighting against the social justice warriors, and like he's the only one who can kill political correctness." And I will tell you that I wrote something like literally on the eve of the election. I wrote a piece saying, you think Trump is going to kill political correctness? Trust me, and like mark my words, political correctness is going to get like 1,000 times worse under Trump because
Yeah,
there's going to be
true.
such a and
True.
it's true,
Yeah,
and
that's what
because
happened.
there's
And you
going
actually
to
made a
be such
tweet
a
recently.
backlash.
You actually
Yeah,
made a tweet recently that I agree with 1,000%, which is that like
yeah,
one of the great things that happened when Biden got elected is that we saw the rise of the normal liberals, the
yeah,
normal
yeah,
left,
exactly.
a massive resurgence. The Overton windows opened back up.
Hmm.
I think it's great. And if Trump wins, well, one, we might not even have a democratic country anymore, but which is a problem. But two, like obviously,
Yes.
the backlash to that is I don't know, because and because people are gonna I don't know, but people are gonna become very
Well,
disillusioned
I
with
know.
with democracy on
I'm,
both sides if Trump wins, because Trump's going to destroy democracy on the right, and he's going to have a lot of people who are willing to enable him in that. And then on the left, they're going to see that,
yeah,
oh well, look, the liberals failed. The liberals can't stop them, so we need to become like Hassan Piker
yes,
and become
exactly.
far left communists or illiberal wokesters or whatever the fuck.
No, that really scares me. I'll tell you that really does scare me. And I mean, I'm hoping that well, first of all, I'm still hoping that either Biden wins or who knows. I mean, maybe if he steps aside, whoever takes over may win. If Trump wins, I mean, I do hope that we still have enough guardrails. I mean, I don't believe that the Supreme Court is going to give Trump everything he wants, because I mean they have like Amy Coney Barrett just uh, issued a ruling
Yeah, I'm not.
in one
I'm
of the
not
cases.
completely like I trust the Supreme Court to some extent. I do hope the guardrails
Yeah,
hold, but we probably don't want to have someone try to test them out.
yeah, no, that is very true. I mean, like because if the argument is, well, our democracy may survive after all,
Oh
well,
my God!
is that really a chance that we
Did
want
you
to
see
take?
the Destiny versus Ben Shapiro debate?
No, I keep hearing about it, but
So
it just
Ben
sounds so annoying.
Ben Shapiro's whole argument for Trump, or his main thing, is that yes, Trump did try to coup the government and keep himself in power after losing the election. He did this. Ben Shapiro's 100% on board. He doesn't lie about that, which is great. But then he
Well, that's
says,
good at least.
but then he says, I'm going to endorse him anyway because I feel like the system's strong enough it'll hold. That's literally his
Yeah.
argument. I'm like, I'm losing. I'm like, what the fuck? So like, wait, well, you're gonna like risk it all voting on a guy who you yourself recognize is a wannabe tyrant, and you're okay with that because you think the
Yeah.
Supreme Court will stop him? Like, I don't know. Seems like it's gambling an awful lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that is true. And we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's kind of bring this back to something Gamergate
Okay,
related, which
well,
is this whole argument that I mean, I don't think that Gamergate elected Trump, by any means, because it's just not that strong. I think there may be some truth to the claim that political correctness and the backlash against it
oh
was
sure, yeah,
electing Trump. So to that extent, I think Gamergate was part of this bigger thing that played a role in electing Trump. Unfortunately, and
well,
um,
okay. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because
well,
so
yeah,
I
sure.
don't think the GamerGate people themselves voted for Trump, but what I
No,
think,
no,
well,
no.
except for the 30% that did, right?
Yeah, right, right.
But I do
No,
think
but
what
I mean, I
happened.
do think that, well, one of the things that I think happened, and I think to that extent, like the critique of or some of the blame directed at Gamergate maybe has like a little kernel of truth. That Gamergate became sort of the paradigm or the prototype for this sort of mass organizing on the internet. Uh, that that propelled these sort of online communities that existed as a backlash against progressivism. I think that's true to some extent. I mean, I think that the alt-right kind of maybe borrowed a little bit from the GamerGate playbook, not that there was a literal GamerGate playbook, but I mean, on the other, I mean, to contradict myself immediately, I mean, I was GamerGate really like the first online movement that
Um,
organized itself
no,
online?
no, it wasn't.
Probably
I mean,
not.
there's Project Chinology, Occupy Wall Street, right? There's various other.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people who act like, Gamergate invented, online harassment. There were a lot of people who got harassed during Occupy Wall Street, who got harassed online. I
Also,
found,
online forums, as you pointed out, with like the Xenoboards and stuff like that's online harassment's been around
oh
since
yeah, absolutely.
basically the
There
internet,
was,
probably.
yeah, there was a lot of harassment in fandoms, but like specifically on a political level, um, there were and I found this by the way while doing research, I think from one of my Gamergate pieces. uh there was in 2012 there was a rash of swattings of conservative bloggers that was associated with Occupy Wall Street. I mean, I don't think they ever arrested anyone for those, but I think it was fairly clear because all of the conservative bloggers who got swatted were people who had like attacked Occupy Wall Street, and I think some of there were swatting. Some people got really nasty death threats. One guy got calls like saying we're going to rape your wife, stuff like that. This is, I think, when he was out of town, like filming something for a critical documentary about Occupy Wall Street, and I think he got a call saying like, "Oh well,
Yeah,
while you were traveling
obviously,
around
yeah,
here,
harassment bad. I
yeah,
disavow.
we're gonna like break into your house and rape your wife," that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, there was certainly harassment that went on like long before that. There was I'll give you another example. What were they called? Oh, Anonymous. Remember the
Yes,
Anonymous
anonymous
group,
movement.
the
Yes.
hackers? Yeah, because there was, and this was something else that I covered like before Gamergate. Do you remember the Steubenville rape case in Ohio where there
Vaguely,
were
yeah. That's
these
a long
two
time ago. But
football players? This was
we only have
2012 to
5 minutes. Do you want to
13.
talk about the Steubenville rape case, or do you want to talk about something else?
No. I wrote something about it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. We can talk about it. I just want to let you know we only have
Oh
like
yeah, no.
unless we re-jump back
I
in.
just want to mention that as a kind of precursor to like an online harassment case that was interesting. Like if people are going to say that like Gamergate invented online harassment, which is ridiculous, but like this was I was just thinking about it in the context of like online harassment coming from the left, because like there was a claim that the city of Steubenville, and it's true because like two very like football is apparently huge, and the Steubenville is this little town in Ohio where there isn't really much else going on, and this was like the high school football team, so these guys are like gods, locally, and some people were really upset that they got accused of rape, and the case was kind of confusing because I think people it was a case that started out with like consensual making out where the girl was very drunk, and I mean I do think that eventually it was a rape because she was passed out and there were some sexual things done to her. So I mean, I do think that those guys were properly convicted. But there were also these bizarre rumors that were swirling because she was molested by two guys, one of whom I think actually did rape her. And there were claims that there was like the football team had like a rape ring that was part of it. There were all these bizarre rumors that were swirling, and uh Anonymous basically started doxing people who they thought were pro rapist. Like they actually started posting online like the home addresses and phone numbers of local people who really were just basically fans of the football team, who I think they basically kind of felt like, well, anyone who was a fan of the football team was pro rape. And I think they posted, like, they accused this one guy of being associated with a rape ring because he had like pictures of a naked or half naked woman in an email attachment, which turned out to be like his girlfriend or something like that. So it was just crazy, crazy stuff. And there were people at the time, people in the progressive camp, who were defending them and who were basically saying, yeah, well, they may be going overboard, but they're defending a rape victim and they're trying to help. And like they're trying to like prevent this cover up, and there was no cover up. I mean, they were a little slow in charging these guys, but they did eventually get charged. There were all these completely baseless claims, like the son of the local DA was supposedly involved in the rape because he also played on the football team. So there was this crazy stuff that
We
led
got 2 minutes.
to numerous people being harassed, and people having to move out. I mean, there were people who, like, the prosecutor had to leave town because she was getting death threats because there was a rumor that her son was part of some rape ring. And and that didn't get like the half the or like 1/100th of the coverage that Gamergate did. That claims of harassment by Gamergate did. And so I mean, I think the idea that somehow internet harassment for political reasons was this new thing was completely off base. That's my point in bringing up Steubenville.
Okay. Well, do you want to
So
keep going, or do you want to let it?
let's continue another time because I'm a
Okay.
little tired.
All
I
right.
think we've been
So
at it
we
for
got 1 minute
2 hours.
left. Next time if we do this, I do want to ask more questions on the question list, but we can also do free form too. Maybe we'll set aside a little more time. We have less than a
Yeah,
minute.
sorry about rambling so
No,
much. Is that
no,
we're
it's
talking about all this fascinating stuff.
well, no, yeah, it's just with it only having like an hour and a half. I'm like, oh, I want to make sure we can cover everything. But we can do a step part two, and we'll get to a
Yeah,
lot
let's
more.
do part two.
Yeah.
Let's do
So,
part two.
where can people find you? Do you want to set yourself out before it kicks us out?
Oh, like Cathy Young 63 at on Twitter. It's CATHYYOUNG. And I'm also on like you can find my stuff on the Bulwark. It's thebulwark.com. But yeah, I mean, if you find me on Twitter, all of my stuff, all roads lead to Twitter. I'm still not calling it X because I think that's just really
Yeah.
dumb. You know,
And don't forget to
yeah,
like, comment, and subscribe, everybody. If you're not subscribed already, be sure to subscribe. Cool. And
all
there's a link
right.
to your Twitter in the description too. Or so. Oh, well, it's out. We're out. We're done. It's over. It's never been more Jover than it is right now. So we'll go ahead and raid somebody, I guess. I like this talk against the clock format, Porcelain says. I also do like that, what was it? Someone said earlier. Technically, she only beats the snot out of them if you're good at the game. Miss Sonata said. That's all right. So who we gonna raid? Who we gonna raid? Cool. I guess we'll raid Destiny. So go check him out.